London, Europe's biggest, busiest city. At night, buildings and streets are lit up for workers and revellers. And yet, there is one place that offers some sanctuary from the bustle and bright lights: Richmond Park. Until morning, it's the darkest and quietest place in the capital. This magical space provides peace and tranquility for millions of Londoners. But it's also a home to thousands of wildlife species. Richmond Park is the largest of London's royal parks, but more than that, it's a national nature reserve, a place to walk, to contemplate and enjoy the natural world. I've lived beside it for over 60 years, and it's been an inspiration to me. Richmond Park's proximity to London has become its greatest challenge. I am just one of over 5.5 million people who visit the park annually, a number which is growing rapidly and means there is more and more pressure on the park's fabric and wildlife. By understanding the rich nature and wildlife of the park, we can all help to protect it and keep it a very special place. Richmond Park has many woods and spinneys, and visitors come to enjoy them and see the ancient trees. The park has over 1,400 ancient or veteran trees, mostly oaks, up to 800 years old. This magnificent old oak tree was already centuries old when King Charles I established the area we now know as Richmond Park as his hunting park in the first half of the 17th century. Oak trees like that, like the park itself, are home to hundreds of different species of animals and plants. The older the tree, the greater the range of wildlife living there. And in springtime, the trees are filled with activity. Birds, mammals, insects and fungi, lichen and spiders can all be found in and around Richmond's great trees. The descendants of King Charles's deer herd are still here centuries later. Today, 600 red and fallow deer roam free in the park. They have a profound impact on the whole of the park's ecology, including the oak trees. The deer reach up to eat the leaves on low-hanging branches of the oaks, giving them the characteristic browse line about 6 feet above the ground. In early summer, a new generation of young deer arrives. They take their first steps within 20 minutes of being born and will stay in hiding for the first weeks of life. Though they have no natural predators within the park, the mothers see humans, and especially dogs, as a threat to their young. Dogs off leads may attack and even kill young deer, so it's not surprising that their mothers can react very aggressively. Oak and other trees give food to the foraging deer and are also vital to hundreds of other species that depend on them and live amongst them. But the importance of the oaks doesn't stop when the tree dies or branches are dropped. Decaying wood is a fundamental habitat and a source of food for many small animals, especially beetles. The biggest beetle in the park is this wonderful creature, a stag beetle. In fact, the park is one of the most important breeding sites for these magnificent creatures. And the reason for that, at least in part, is the amount of dead wood that's allowed to accumulate on the ground. The beetle larvae live in the rotting wood, spending up to 6 years eating it and growing as large as possible. When the adult beetles emerge from the dead wood in late spring, they will only live for a few weeks, but their short lives will, nonetheless, be dramatic. They're also known as oak ox and horse pinchers, and it's easy to see why. The male's enormous horns. They use them for battling other males to gain access to females, much as male deer use their antlers. After mating, the females lay their eggs in the rotting wood, carrying on the cycle. Because fallen wood is home to stag beetles and many other small creatures, it's very important that it shouldn't be removed or interfered with. Much better to allow it to lie where it is. Beetles and other insects provide food for many birds, and over 50 species of birds nest in the park. One of the most familiar and best loved is the green woodpecker. Green woodpeckers raise up to 7 chicks, and the parents need to forage all day to find enough to eat for all the family. Unlike other woodpeckers, greens only occasionally peck trees in search of food. They usually feed on the ground and are specialists in one particular insect that is abundant in the park: yellow meadow ants. Each woodpecker can eat around 2,000 ants every day, more if they have a large brood of young to feed. These ants build distinctive mounds in the open grassland to cover their nests and absorb heat from the sun, which helps to incubate the developing eggs underground. The mounds are delicate and easily damaged by people stepping or jumping on them. The ants' mounds are part of the park's sensitive and legally protected acid grasslands, which thrive on the park's poor soil. In summer, the grasslands are a wonderful sight with a profusion of colourful wildflowers and thousands of busy flying insects. Many of the wildflowers have lovely traditional names, such as harebell, also known as lady's thimble or witch's bells, sheep sorrel, and yellow tormentil, the root of which is used as a dye and in herbal remedies. They are an important source of nectar for hundreds of species of invertebrates, including grasshoppers, bumblebees, honey and burrowing bees, and many moths and butterflies. Surprisingly, one of the biggest threats to the park's acid grassland is from dog feces, hyper-rich in nutrients and very damaging to the grassland. Another threat to the grasslands is bracken, which, left alone, can take over and destroy the grassland's fragile ecology. The traditional way of controlling it is by rolling or crushing, and in Richmond Park, that means using these wonderful Shire horses. At the height of summer, the park is alive with breeding birds, which make use of the glut of insects to feed their young. Families of reed bunting and stonechat nest and feed in the bracken around the park. Between March and August, the park's grasslands also host one of London's few remaining populations of skylarks. Skylark numbers have fallen substantially in the last 20 years, partly because they nest on the ground and are easily disturbed by people and particularly dogs off leads. If their decline continues, sadly, their wonderful song may soon disappear from the park. Some birds are found in the park year-round, while others are seasonal visitors. While some birds have fallen in numbers, others have recently arrived and are not always welcome, in particular the ring-necked parakeet. Originally from India, this invasive bird, believed to have been accidentally released into the wild in the 1950s, can be seen and heard all over Richmond Park. Their calls drown out many native birds, and they nest in tree holes, competing with woodpeckers, nuthatches and other birds. The impact of these invasive species on native wildlife is a problem I've seen around the world. When people leave the park and the gates are closed at the end of the day, the park becomes especially important for nocturnal creatures. Bats emerge to forage on insects by moonlight. The park is an exceptional site for bats, and it's home to over half of the UK's species, including pipistrelle, brown long-eared, and the rare and wonderfully named natterer's bat. Most bats require darkness no brighter than a full moon, and bats that hunt using echolocation need a quiet environment to be able to listen out for their prey. With increasing urbanization and development near the park, light pollution and noise are growing problems for nocturnal wildlife. Moths, toads, bats and owls are all badly affected by increases in artificial lighting and noise. At night, the twit-to-oo of the tawny owl may be heard in the park, but it's rarely seen. In contrast, the charismatic little owl is often seen foraging at dusk. Little owl chicks hatch in the early summer, and after a few weeks they will be leaving the nest to explore their surroundings, but are still reliant on their parents to bring them food. Unlike most owls, little owls are also seen in the daytime, and as dawn breaks in summer, there are hungry mouths to feed. Foraging goes on well after the park's gates reopen in the morning. Crucial to the park's success as a haven for wildlife is water. Without water, there can be no life. An oak tree consumes about 200 gallons of it a day. Deer come to the ponds to drink and relax. There are about 30 bodies of standing water within the park, as well as reed beds and a flowing brook. Reed beds allow protection for waterfowl to safely rear chicks. A pair of great crested grebes will often be seen raising their brood in the early summer months. And a healthy pond means a good supply of food for the chicks. A lot of work needs to be carried out to keep the park's water sources healthy and thriving. Beverley Brook, an ancient name which means originally Beaver's Meadow, runs through the park for 2 miles. Over the years, it was straightened for drainage, which destroyed wildlife habitats and made the brook almost sterile. Now, experts and volunteers are helping to return the brook to a more natural winding shape, planting trees and water plants, and putting in temporary fencing to stop deer grazing the river's vegetation. This will encourage fish and other aquatic life, attracting feeding kingfishers, herons and wading birds. The deer grow new antlers every year, and in autumn the males come together for the annual rut. The biggest and strongest compete for the right to mate with the park's females. It's astonishing to see one of the UK's greatest natural spectacles so close to the centre of its capital. But so many people want to watch or photograph the rut that it disturbs the deer. Sometimes rutting deer can attack people or dogs that get too close, especially when dogs are running off leads. Autumn brings a wonderful rush of colour to the trees of the park and a natural harvest of acorns, sweet chestnuts and beech mast for the wildlife. Oak trees have been standing here for centuries, but even after 700 years, they are still producing acorns. And acorns, of course, are a very important food for many different creatures. Jays, woodpeckers, squirrels, mice, and of course deer. Deer, like goats, will eat almost anything, and will take picnic food and even litter that lies hidden in the grass, which can cause severe digestion problems and even death. As well as acorns and sweet chestnuts carpeting the ground, colourful fungi emerge in the autumn. The park has over 400 species of fungi, many of them rare, including fly agaric. Wild mushrooms and toadstools are not just good to look at. They are another rich source of food for deer, mice, squirrels and insects. They also help to clean up the environment, mopping up bacteria and cleansing soil in preparation for the next year's new growth in spring. Richmond Park is Londoners' own special national nature reserve, but it belongs to everybody. And visitors have been coming here for centuries from all over the country and indeed beyond. But now it's receiving some 5.5 million visitors a year, and steps have to be taken to protect it. If we leave nothing behind and take nothing away, if we in fact tread lightly, Richmond Park will remain a paradise for us and our children and our grandchildren to enjoy for many centuries to come. There are simple things we could all do to help protect the park and its wildlife. Wildflowers, trees, nuts, acorn and fungi are all essential food sources for birds, bees and deer. Fallen wood is home to many insects. Please leave it where it is. Take home or clean up anything not naturally found in the park. Clear up after your dog. Take home your litter, or put it in the bins provided so deer don't eat it. Give deer plenty of room, especially during birthing and the rut. Keep your dog on a lead in sensitive areas and near animals. If you're on foot, stay on established paths and away from the anthills. If you're on a bike, stay to the roads and bike trail. And please don't light a fire or barbecue. Whether your visit to Richmond Park is once in a lifetime or every day, enjoy it and be inspired by its history, beauty and wildlife. Please love it as I do, And remember to tread lightly in Richmond Park.